The Havila Ferry is a coastal route in Norway that travels for 2,500 nautical miles and makes 34 port stops as it makes its way from Bergen all the way up to Kirkenes. The round trip takes 12 days, but it is possible just to go in one direction, which takes about 6 or 7 days depending on which route you take. There are 4 identical ships in Havila's fleet: the Castor, the Capella, the Pollux, and the Polaris. I was on the Havila Pollux and I sailed the last week of November into the first week of December 2025. Now, Havila runs year-round, including in the winter. Even though hands down summer's the most popular time to take this trip, I chose winter. Seeing the northern lights on the Havila is a bucket list item for a lot of people. Havila is so confident that you're going to see the northern lights on your trip that if you don't see them on a round trip voyage, they will offer you a northbound or a southbound trip completely on their dime. Now, this guarantee applies to travelers that are doing the round trip anywhere from October 1st to March 31st. So when I talk about the northern lights season in this video, those are the dates that I'm referring to. Let's do some specifics. I sailed November 25th to December 6th, 2025, and I sailed into polar night, which is usually around November 27th, 28th, and I hit it somewhere around Tromsø. Once we crossed into the Arctic Circle and we sailed into polar night, I didn't see the sun again for 5 days until we came back down and crossed over the Arctic Circle. It was wild. Now, I specifically chose this time, yes, because I wanted to see the northern lights, but I also am just a huge polar night fan. Hands down, polar night over midnight sun any day, fight me. But why am I a fan of polar night? Well, there's a couple of different reasons. First of all, the earlier it gets dark, the earlier you have the potential to see the northern lights. If it doesn't get dark until 10 o'clock, then you might be waiting until midnight, 1, 2, or even 3 a.m. to see the northern lights. And I've done my fair share of 3 a.m. northern lights hunts, and I will do what it takes to get the shot. But if it gets dark at 4, and you can see the lights at 6 or 7, and then be in bed by 10, just saying. It has its perks. When I started the trip in Bergen, we had about 6 hours of daylight. It got dark around 4 o'clock, and then as the further north we got, the earlier it got dark. Here's the thing with going during polar night. Are you trading daylight for the chance of seeing the northern lights? Absolutely. Does it affect the excursions? Absolutely. For example, I got to North Cape when we had very little daylight left, and then by the time we were already back on the bus, it was pitch black. I actually didn't mind that because I got to see the statue in 2 different lights. I got to see, it was also like freezing cold and storming, but I think that's kind of the perfect environment to see North Cape in. Welcome to North Cape. Just another day in Arctic paradise. But it does change your options. I really wanted to do the Atlantic Road and the Mind excursion from Christiansand, but by the time the tour was starting, it was already pitch black. And if you know anything about the Atlantic Road, the whole point is to be able to see the things, and I wasn't going to be able to see the things with its pitch black, so I didn't do that. But next time, if I ever have the opportunity to go back, I would absolutely do that excursion. But that is a great example of how polar night does change the vibe of some of the excursions. But one of the perks of going during this time of year is fewer crowds. Now, the ships have a capacity of 640 passengers. I don't even think my ship was half full. I think there were maybe 200 people on my ferry, and it was awesome. I loved it. I didn't have to compromise on dining times. There was never a line anywhere I went. None of the excursions were ever booked ahead of time. I got to book everything on the ship day by day. On the flip side of that, there were a couple of excursions that got canceled because nobody signed up, or they only had like one person signed up. None of the excursions I wanted to do ever got canceled, so worked out for me. I do think my voyage was the exception, not the norm. Your mileage may vary, but I absolutely loved having a half-empty ship. Back to the lights. Now, the ship does make an announcement if the northern lights are out and about, but they weren't always consistent with this. Like, there was one time I saw the lights before anybody else, and I waited for them to make the announcement, and it never came, so I ran down to the 4th deck so that they could make the announcement, and they did. I don't know if the Aurora has to be a certain strength before they make an announcement on the ship, but yeah, they were hit or miss with this. Now, the announcements will play throughout the entire ship, but you do have the option to have it played through your cabin, and you can do that through a switch on your phone. It was the first thing I did when I got into my cabin. I was not missing a light show, and I didn't. All right, let's talk about cameras. I brought a few different cameras to photograph the northern lights. Here's where I landed on all of them. First off, if you're going to bring a DSLR or a mirrorless camera to shoot the northern lights, there are some things you need to know. Now, you can absolutely get by with just your cell phone. These days, these cameras are really, really smart at taking low light pictures. I have an iPhone 14 Pro, and I got some really great shots with it. But if you're going to take a DSLR or a mirrorless camera, here are some things you should know. I brought a few different cameras to shoot the northern lights. First off, I brought my Canon G7X Mark II. This is my handy dandy pocket camera. I've had this for about 10 years now, since it first came out. I love it. I usually use this camera for time lapses, and that was the plan when I got on the ship. Spoiler alert, that didn't happen. Now for stills, I brought my full frame mirrorless camera, which is a Sony a7 III with my Tamron 17-28. This is my tried and true trusty combo. This travels with me anywhere I go to see the northern lights. I absolutely love this combo. Highly recommend. Not sponsored. Would love to be sponsored though, because that's expensive. I also brought my Insta360 X3 with me, but we all know this is trash in low light conditions. This was mainly for daylight and vlogging. I didn't even try to shoot the northern lights with it. So wind and waves were my biggest enemies on the ship, and they're going to be yours too. Northern lights photography, and really any low light photography in general, requires a longer shutter speed to get the pictures that you want. Now the speed of the Aurora will determine the shutter speed, but that's honestly getting way too advanced for what I want to talk about in this video. Now, since you're going to need a longer shutter speed, you're going to need a tripod. I highly, highly, highly recommend you get a 5-footer at least. The ship's rails are like 4.5 feet tall, and if you want to get shots without the rail, without shooting your camera straight up, then you're going to want a taller tripod. Wind and waves killed my long shutter speed almost immediately. So the boat, obviously, they're not going to stop the ship for the lights. So, like, you're still cruising down the Norwegian Sea at whatever speed they go. But not only you're going this way, but with the waves, you're also going up and down. And that's really what's going to kill your shutter speeds. We also hit some super bad weather for, like, the majority of the trip. So, like, our waves were really tossing us around. But just a heads up. Mother Nature, she has a sense of humor. There are some things you can do. The back of the ship on the 8th deck is going to have the best windbreak, but even still, there were several times where I was just too nervous to have my tripod in this environment. I thought I was going to tip over. As you all know, camera equipment is super expensive, and I wasn't about to like lose my camera on this ship. In addition to like a 5-foot trusty tripod, I also brought one of these boys, which is like a gorilla tripod, and it's got legs that you can kind of like hook onto anything, and that was my intention. I really wanted to hook this onto the side of the ship, like on the railing, so that I could get some time-lapse footage with my Canon camera. That didn't work out either. There was no place on the ship that I could put this where I thought that it was safe and it wasn't going to go overboard. I ended up just using my Canon for handhelds for the most of it, which was a bummer. I really wanted to get some awesome time lapses on this ship of the lights, but that just didn't happen. In addition to all of those tripods, I also brought this tiny little magnetic tripod. It's got just a standard clip there that you can screw on pretty much anything, and this is magnetic. This actually came in clutch for several different reasons. I mainly stuck my Insta360 cam to it, but you could stick anything to it. I wouldn't stick my mirrorless on it because I don't think this magnet is strong enough, but I mean the whole ship's magnetic, so you can stick this pretty much anywhere you want to go. This came in handy way more times than I thought it would. This was like 15 bucks on Amazon. 10 out of 10, good purchase. But if you're gonna do this, I do recommend a sturdy tripod and maybe counterweight it with a backpack or something at the bottom. Anything you need to make sure that that is stable. Another thing to note is they don't turn the ship lights off for the Northern Lights. I get why. I mean, the ship does need to be visible as it traverses this very popular coastal route, but it will affect your photos. There was one night where they turned off all the lights very briefly, like maybe for 5 minutes, and then they popped them all back on. But that 5 minutes was glorious, and I think it was because like we had such an incredible show that night. But yeah, the ship lights will be a problem for you as well. Of the 11 nights on the ship, I would say I had 6 realistic nights where I was within the Aurora range and I had the potential to see the Northern Lights, and I saw them 5 of those nights, which is pretty good. Every time that I saw them, it was visible with the naked eye. They were green, just like you would see in the photos. I know sometimes you can just see like those gray and white clouds, and then your camera picks up the actual green. These were visible greens with the naked eye. There was one night where we got like an explosion and you could see it form across the sky, and that was magical. It went straight over the ship. That one was a really great show. On the other nights, there were kind of those slower auroras that just kind of pulse, dance for a hot second, and then skedaddle. Admittedly, I'm a bit of a Northern Light snob, and even though I did get to see the Aurora 5 times on this trip, none of them made it into my top 10. I try to take 1 or 2 trips a winter up into the Aurora range to shoot the Northern Lights, so I'm blessed to be able to have seen them several times throughout my career. Sadly, none of these shows got into my top 10, but even a bad Northern Lights show is still an incredible Northern Lights show. And that experience is only magnified when you're surrounded by everybody on the ship that is like so jazzed to see them and is bopping, like jumping around, and everybody's asking everybody to take pictures for them. Like, that atmosphere is just an incredible vibe to watch the lights with. I didn't make this video to deter you from bringing your camera. On the contrary, you should bring your cameras. During the day, you're going to see incredible landscapes that you're going to want to shoot. If you're used to shooting Northern Lights on land, it's a whole different ballgame when you're on the ship. Just be prepared to get creative with your Northern Lights photography, and you're going to take some amazing shots. If you like this video, please subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and follow along for more Arctic adventures, and stay awesome, y'all.